Oftentimes God loves to walk us through the wilderness or through the storms of life. And one of the top things on his list, I believe, that he wants to accomplish in the wilderness as he leads us through is to remove any and every crutch. And a crutch is anything which can be leaned on in place of Christ. And so some people, it just, if we take an inventory, what do I chase when I need a hit? Some people get online and buy stuff. Some people seek out unhealthy relationships and outside of the boundaries of a biblical framework. Some people seek out a heightened measure of anger or whatever. A crutch can be anything, to be honest. And I think some of us built our lives on things that please the flesh. And, if Jesus was led through the wilderness to kick off his run, then I think all of us should assume we're going to spend some time in the wilderness. And I have learned one of my favorite things. I will go into a wilderness season having no idea the crutches that I am leaning on.
Right.
And the desert exposes any and every crutch. And it's actually his love that says, Preston, I want to take you on a walk that crutches can't survive. And so it's, a lot of people lament the wilderness, quote unquote, the storms of life. I actually think some of God's best work is done in us, in the storms of life in the wilderness.
Why?
I think because he has our full attention. I go back to 9/11. I was a young pastor.
Well said. Yeah.
And I think I was 21, 22 years old. And I remember when 9/11 happened, the small, tiny little church that we had started that had about 60 people, so many people who had never been to our church before started just filling the place, so much so that we had to create midweek prayer services because the appetite got so big so fast. And what I learned was some of life's most difficult circumstances actually show us what we knew we should have been doing the entire time before the storm started. That's why I think God does some of his best work, because when times are easy, what is our flesh prone to do? Take shortcuts.
Oh, yeah.
We try and get away with a little bit more because everything's awesome. But once the winds kick up, and if the winds really kick up, and maybe it's an economic catastrophe, maybe it's war in an area, when things get so scary, what happens? What church history would say? Many call on the name of the Lord. And so I at 26, I lamented the wilderness. At 46, it's become one of my favorite places to live.
How do you find, in your experience, how do you learn, again, this is the metaphor, and perhaps even I'm thinking about Elijah, 1 Kings 19, and we could take ourselves to multiple stories, examples in the scriptures. How do you find water in the rock, so to speak? I've got a two-part question, but I want to start there. When you're in the wilderness and your senses are saying, I have been abandoned, I am alone, I can't sense him, I can't feel him, I have a reflex to self-protect, to self-promote, to lean on my own understanding and act with an independent spirit. How do you move in the opposite spirit of all that to find the water in the rock, the sustenance in the wilderness? Or is it brought to us?
Well, I think part of it is we have to come to the end of ourselves. When I realize I can't make water come out of the rock, then where do I fall? On the rock upon which I stand. It's where I'm going to fall. I'm not going to lean. I'm going to fall. I went through, when I was in my early 20s, a 9-month period where I didn't feel like I heard the Lord speak one time. And it was because of my own pride. I didn't realize it at the time. But going without what felt like a morsel of his word, a morsel of a syllable of his voice, honestly framed the rest of my life. And it created an insatiable appetite where I just won't let it go too long. When I was young, I would see how long I could go without living water. At 46, I have learned I will die without it. And so to really answer the question, I think the more desperate we become, the more divine his response.
What does it mean in practical terms, experiential terms, perhaps, coming to the end of ourselves? We've heard that a lot. It's in our lexicon of Christian vernacular, and I think it's appropriate and it's very right. How has that played out to you? What does it look like for the average disciple of Jesus who's listening today to say, hey, you know what? I'm in this liminal state. I feel a lot of tension and adversity. And what I hear you saying is, let it happen, because our reflex is to fight against it.
Absolutely. Absolutely let it happen. I mean, this is some of the deepest connections I've ever experienced with the Lord came when I had nothing left to bring to the table. And it is in those moments where I learn, Lord, I have nothing to bring but myself. And I mean, to be honest, when I was young, I thought I had it all figured out. I thought I could do it by myself. And in his grace, he let me go through some really hard knocks so that I would cling to the hem of his garment. And if he has to drag me, I will be the woman with the issue of blood for the rest of my life if I have to. I will be the woman who said, yeah, but even the dogs get the crumbs. When you go through the depths of the dark valley and you find him, forget about finding yourself. You get into the valley.
Come on, Preston.
When you encounter the king of the cosmos, you don't pay attention to yourself. You are so captivated by his glory, by his magnificence, by his power, his sovereignty. And I think for me, and I can't speak for everyone else, but for me, I think the most practical thing that can happen, John said it probably better than anybody. I've got to decrease so that he might increase.